It's time to welcome our fourth speaker, Hema Murthy. She's a professor at the Indian Institute of Technology, Madras. So she's the only speaker in today's program who is from Chennai. Hema did her undergraduate studies at Osmania University, her master's at McMaster in Canada, and her PhD at IIT Madras, where she now is a professor in the Computer Science and Engineering department. Her research interests include speech processing, music information retrieval, computational brain research, and she's been involved in a lot of work to do with text-to-speech translation and natural language processing translation, the mission of the government of India. So today her work has won her a lot of recognition. She's a fellow of the International Speech Communication Association, the Indian National Academy of Engineering. Today she's going to talk to us about a very interesting topic, which is classical music in search of algorithms.
Not only that, I'm not I'm from Chennai. I'm also the only engineer perhaps in this group to talk. And so this is going to be a completely an applied talk. Let me try to, I know it's been already a long day and I'll try to finish. And I think thanks to Siddharth for setting the stage. What we're trying to do here is, what we're saying is, you have deep learning models, you have great machine learning models, but I think we need to use a culture specific approach. That's precisely what we're saying, because deep learning models take huge amounts of computer power and huge amounts of memory, and do we really need it for for doing certain tasks? That's what we're looking at. So I'm going to talk about Carnatic music, and the title is, how do we use a culture specific approach to process Carnatic music? I was telling you, when we started this work, it was an open, clean slate. There was nobody who was doing this kind of machine learning and Carnatic music processing. And there are two important aspects to Carnatic music, or any music for that matter: melody and rhythm. And these are the two things that we are going to talk about. This is just an outline of my talk. And wherever possible, we'll try to see if we can talk about other genres like Hindustani and Western for that matter. To give you an introduction, why is it necessary to even process? Music has been and continues to be an integral part of human civilization. There are huge collections of different genres of music on various digital platforms. The music information retrieval is, the objective is, you have millions of things in YouTube. Is it possible for us to gainfully interact with them, these digital connections, and choose what you want to listen to based on certain criteria? I mean, I'm a listener too, and I keep on searching and say, oh, I didn't get what I want. So in the context of Carnatic music, we are looking at raga, tala, instrument, singer, what have you. And we not only want to extract this useful information from the music, but we want to organize it. Can we organize this, use this machine learning algorithms, and organize the music based on genre, melody, artist, rhythm, whatever it may be? This is what we wanted to talk about. Music is characterized by melody, rhythm, timbre, and polyphony. I'm only going to talk about melody and rhythm, and in particular in Carnatic music. For those of you who do not know what Carnatic music is, I want to talk about a Carnatic music concert. Concert is what all of us enjoy in Carnatic music. It's made up of a sequence of items. Items correspond to different forms. Each form has a specific characteristics, and melodies or ragas are seldom repeated except in thematic concerts. One or more pieces are elaborated in a concert: a kriti, which consists of an alapna; a composition, which consists of a pallavi, anupallavi, and charanam; niraval, swaraprastara. These are all, the alapna, the niraval, the swaraprastara, are complete improvisations, and a solo percussion. And then there could also be a ragam thanam pallavi, which consists of an alapna, a thanam, and a composition, a pallavi line only. Pallavi is actually rendered at different speeds. Swaraprastara may include many different melodies. Rhythmic cycles chosen are generally rather complex, for example, Aitalam, Tisranadai for that matter. And there are other types like Padam, Javali, Virittam, Slokam, Varnam, so many of them. So basically, the idea is a concert is like a story that the artist who's sitting on stage tells the audience. And at the end of it, you say, oh, great concert. And what we want to do is, can we find out what are the properties of these great concerts? So this is a structure of a concert represented at a finite state machine. And what we have done is we found that a concert is actually, in Carnatic music, it's a conversation that the artist has with the audience. So it has a lot of applauses in between. So, there was one concert of Sanjay Subramaniam There were 9 items in the concert, 35 applauses. So, it's interspersed as applauses, and artists want that applause, because unless they have that applause, they cannot. It's really a nice conversation between the artists and the musician and the audience. So, I talked about melody and rhythm being important. What is melody? Melody is defined as a single monophonic pitch sequence that a listener might reproduce if asked to whistle or hum a piece of polyphonic music, and the listener would recognize as being the essence of that music when heard in comparison. This is not our definition, this is the definition by Polliner and Danilis, who are big experts in music information retrieval. So, melody is thus a tune that is characterized by a sequence of distinct, we call them fundamental frequencies. And I'm just going to play something here to give you a feeling for what it is. So, this is what a melody is. And what is the advantage? So, what we do is you heard the music, for example, going through various notes. Our objective is to first of all detect these notes. What's the advantage of it? We can do chord recognition as in Western classical music, where 3 notes played together. You can perform synchronization and alignment. I can find out where the pallavi starts and ends, where the anupallavi starts and ends, maybe how much paraprasada the person has done, or cover song detection, where we want to say, are the 2 songs from the same source, for example. So, basically structure recovery is what is possible, and that's what we wanted to do. So, what you heard as the continuous frequency changing thing was a distinct fundamental frequency called F0, and the range of an octave is defined as something range of frequencies between F0 and 2F0, and fundamental frequencies in a ratio of 2:1 are perceived similar. A sa at the lower octave, sa at the higher octave are perceived similar. An octave is equally divided into 12 units on a logarithmic scale, or called a cent scale, and the Western music uses what is called the equitemperament scale, and the Indian music uses what is called the natural scale, where the difference is that I'll come to that a little later. And scale is essentially like, the arohana, arohana for that matter, a set of discrete pitches that repeats every octave. Okay, tonic is the keynote or the first note. For example, the song is set in this particular shruti, is sung in this particular shruti, and chords are a set of harmonic pitches, not really relevant to the Indian context. They're played together. So you always, when you're playing the guitar for a song, you want to find the chords first. And this circle here essentially tells me that in the cent scale, for example, 100 cents corresponds to a semitone. In Indian classical music, if you look at sarigama padanisa, these are divided. They're divided into 12 equal semitones on the cent scale. And when you go through this cycle, for example, 1 octave, you come back, the next octave actually folds on itself and kind of sounds similar. So this is what we started out with. Then eventually, when we started this work on Carnatic music, we found that there were significant differences between Indian and Western classical music, where there was a lot of work that was done. Western music based on the harmonic scale. I already said that Indian music is based on the natural scale. I'll give you a table which talks about it. Generally, absolute frequencies are used. In Indian classical music, relative frequencies are used. What do we mean? You choose a particular sa, some shruti there, and with respect to that, you render the song. And Western music is carefully annotated. There is some skeletal annotation that is there, but it's not that if I see an annotation of Carnatic music that I can sing from the skeletal annotation that I read. And Western music has some improvisation. Carnatic music has a lot of improvisation. In fact, that's true of Indian art music. So here is a picture. What we did was we took that F0 which I talked about. I measured that F0, and then we just took all the pitches that are there, we made a histogram. And what is this red color corresponds to Western classical music. If you notice, this is sa, re, ga, ma, pa, da, ni. This is done for C major in Western classical, which is equivalent to Raga Bilawal in Hindustani classical, and Carnatic classical, it becomes Raga Shankarabaranam. So what you see is that in Western classical, it's very sharp, the notes. So you can actually pick the notes off even using a rule base. Whereas if I look at Hindustani classical, it's also somewhat sharper, but Carnatic actually has a lot of variation. You're saying a note ga, but you're actually singing riga, 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 whatever it may be. So it's not that you're, forcing yourself to sing that particular note. It's very interesting that if you listen to Indian classical music with a Western ear, you're going to hear Besur, you're going to say it's apaswaram. That's what you're going to say. So what we mean is a culture specific approach is actually required for processing in classical music. This is what I was talking about, natural frequencies. These are the ratios, and these are the ratios in the harmonic scale. So there's some slight differences which you can actually perceive. If you take the sa to be 261, which is C4, and you take the same thing here, these are the differences that you see, but essentially sa can be any note. In Indian classical music, the sa note can be anywhere from 110 hertz to about 220 or 230 hertz, and everything relatively moves. So, um, as we said, music is without a score, does not have absolute time, and the problem is the performer chooses what speed he is going to sing. I'm going to play you something here. Sanjay, for example, singing Wo Rangasai, and I just want you to look at the duration of the sound here. I'm just playing the Pallavi line over here. This is the Pallavi line. And you look at another person called Savita Kartik. So what is the difference between the two of them? One is starting his sa at a much lower pitch, somewhere around 130 hertz. Savita Kartik is starting her sa at 200 hertz. And Sanjay is singing it at a much faster pace. That Pallavi line was 10 seconds long. In Savita Kartik's, the Pallavi line is 16 seconds long. But both correspond to the same composition, okay? The same melody. So how do we compare this? Because this is very different, because in Western classical it will say 62 beats per minute and this is the duration. Why is so important in Western classical? Because it's an ensemble, whereas Indian music is very, very individualistic. So basically, first thing that we realized was music is not set to a particular key. And I just want to show one thing on what I told you about this pitch. What is it that we are trying to look at? Here is a picture of what we do. So this red line corresponds to that F naught which I was talking about, which you heard in the sitar for that matter. This is with respect to Savita Kartik's music. So first thing that we do is we detect this, for example, and if your sruti is different or your tonic is different, this line will be elsewhere. That's the problem. So we first have to detect this. Here it has made some octave errors and we need to correct for these octave errors. But first what we had to do was we had to find out what this tonic, so we said everything is based on the sa that you're choosing. So how do I find this sa? That was the first thing. We spent almost 1.5 years trying to figure this out. And so what we did was, and what are the advantages of doing this pitch which I talked about? You can do Motivic analysis, you can do raga identification, you can reproduce even a melody from pitch contours. This is just to give you an idea of, I'm going on talking about this tonic. What happens when we have it in two different tonics? Here is an example. This is tonic 1. This is around 138 to 140 hertz. And this is tonic 2, sung at 160 hertz. So this musician has sung the same thing, and if you notice that the whole thing is transposed, so I just cannot compare this directly unless I have normalized it with respect to the sa. That's what we started. And what is our objective? To analyze something like this. this is what we wanted to do. So how do we analyze this, this alapana in the context without knowing what the tonic is, without knowing where the sa happens? And this is the first task that we did. And I'm going to, what we realized was, first thing about any music for that matter, is that the sa pa sa has a particular ratio. Sa is at 1 unit, then pa is at 1.5, and the higher sa is at 2 units. And then the point is, it's very interesting that even if you do not have the tambura in the background, you can always tell what the shruti is. That's what we realized, and we started out with this. So what we did was, we took these, here is a pitch histogram. This is the sa here. It's not the tallest peak, and the tonic, and it's not the tallest peak here either in Carnatic music. In fact, in many compositions in Hindustani music, you won't even hear the sa at all. So we said, how do we do this? Then what we did was, we took the pitch histogram, did some post-processing, then applied a simple, template matching based machine learning algorithm, and we said, this is sa, the lower sa, pa sa, for example, 100, 150, 200, 300, and 400. We looked for 5 matches or so, and we said, wherever we find the best match, that is the tonic. So that's the first thing that we did. I must tell you, it took us almost more than a year to solve this between various groups that we worked with. Another thing that we also realized was that we could actually, if you look at this here, this is actually the pitch contour which I was talking about, that, the tune. And in between, there are gaps here, if you see this. And this is where only the tambura is playing. And from the tambura, I can very quickly determine what the tonic is. And to give you an idea, this is what we did. We took a look. So, there are some small gaps, and you can find out that the tambura is playing in the background. Here's another. So what we did was, we detected these using what is called signal processing by observing. This is what I say culture specific here, because we observe that these gaps are there. Then we use a technique called non-negative matrix factorization, which is kind of a bag of words technique, and we found out what the tonic was. So now we are tonic normalized, and immediately, once we have tonic normalized, initially I played 2 artists playing at 2 different tonics, and I want to say, okay, is this Kambodi or not? Then we need to get the motives. Now I got all of them to the same range. That's the first thing that we did. And the point is, we must remember that Indian music, today I will sing at 138 hertz, tomorrow I will sing at 140 hertz. Day I'm having a cold, maybe it will even become 125 hertz. It's not that a single artist has a particular pitch. You tune the tambura, you may not do it exactly. And then the next thing that we said was, okay, now that I have tonic normalized, I have these motifs for a raga, which have been identified, let's say, by some musicians. Can I locate this? And then again, we modified some basic computer science algorithms to do this. And so we had of course, I had musicians who helped me with this. This is a Kalyani phrase. This is the same phrase by the. So we said, can we show that these two are matched? Although the shrutis are different. And we did some machine learning algorithm with computer science rule based to correct it. These are called stationary points, and we actually found out these correspond to the gamakas. And then you could do some little bit of clever processing based on the knowledge of this domain, rather than just pushing it into a machine learning algorithm. And then we found what are called these stationary points, which are these peaks over here, peaks or valleys over here, and did further processing. And then we used it to reduce the search space. And next, we went back to the original pitch contour that we had and did a perfect match. We had to do some interpolation correction. And these things, machine learning will do it very, very well. We did this. And here is so you could make a query. I could give a typical Bhairavi query and say, find out where it has happened in the composition. Here is an example. So he's talking 1 minute. And then here these gray bars are the portions where it is founded. Notice that the durations are not the same, but you can do this using what is called rough. So we were able to find out where these motifs occur. But the problem is I had to get a musician to tell me what are the typical motifs of ragas. And if you have worked with musicians, they never come on time, and it's very difficult to get them to come and work in the lab. Then we said we need to do something else. And so what we did was we decided to find these things on our own. We developed a particular transformation. And if you see this over here, this is our work here. I'm not talking about, this is what is used in conventionally in Western classical music, which does not show any pattern at all. If you look at here, these are two different artists singing the same motif, and you can actually find it. Okay, and let me play these for you. This is Scalian, I think, in this one. DK Patamal. Okay, and you can find them, and automatically we developed a technique by which we could find these. And then we went further and we said, okay, there was another thing that we found. In the meanwhile, we had also started learning a lot. I had a lot of music students who were working with me. And we realized that actually in Carnatic music is so much composition oriented. The Pallavi line of the composition in all its variant forms has all the properties of the raga. Let me give you an example here. This is sung by a very young girl. I mean, now she's much older, but let me play this. She has sung some 9 different variants, okay? And it almost has all the properties of the Hamsadvani Raga. So going back to the previous picture that we had, we said, okay, can I give a query like this? And this is an unmatched segment. This is an unmatched segment. And you will see that there are some, you have to look at it a little bit closely, you see that these two pictures are more similar, and it comes back saying these are matched. So we use some machine learning algorithm again. There are some, obviously machine learning is required because there's a lot of noise. And then after the problem was I had to give the query, right? This whole query, if I give, that is, if I give one Pallavi line, it will find out all the Pallavi lines. Then we said this is not good enough. So we said we need to find this query line automatically. And we found that that was also quite easy to do using the same algorithm by simply, reducing the duration, increasing the duration. And some machine learning with all these various query lengths, like what you do always in machine learning, we use lots of data and we pump this in, and then finally it comes out with this query over here, and it tells you what are these. This is again, the query is repeating again. Let me play you a result here. Notice that this is not having any mridangam or whatever, and it finds the same thing in the last one. So what we were able to do was, using a little bit of machine learning and also the fact that Carnatic music has these characteristics, given a composition, we were able to automatically divide it into Pallavi, Anupallavi and Charanam. So we segmented it. So now from the Pallavi, you can see how many times, what is the advantage of this? I can say, somebody has how many different variations of the Pallavi line. So I can, I can add metadata when I do music information retrieval, saying Pallavi line so many times, Anupallavi line so many times, and Charanam, Swaraprastara, and so on. This is what we did. And we found that actually it scales quite well even for Western classical. And So it's able to pick up even in other genres. Then what we did was, once we had these Pallavi lines, we said, what is it that tells you that it's the same raga? As I said, Carnatic music is very composition based. So we just searched across various compositions in the same raga for that common motive which a musician had marked for us. We said, find these common motives automatically using machine learning, and that's what we did. I'm just looking at the time. Let me play one or two motifs which it found. So it found this for Bhairavi, and here is Shankaravanam and Varali. So it found this, and then now we said, okay, we are equipped with the typical motifs of a raga. Can I somehow use this to do raga identification? Okay, and that's what we did. And we said, you give me a composition, I'll find out what the raga is all about. And that's precisely what we were able to do. You give this song or the alap or whatever it may be, and it will simply do, again, a machine learning based algorithm. But we did it in a kind of different way. We said, when you're listening as a listener, no, when you're sitting in a concert and listening, you're saying, hey, is this one of these ragas? When you listen, you say, oh, sounds like Vrindavan Saranga, sounds like Kapi. That's how you start. So we say that person first 1 second, less than a second, when you hear, you're already reducing your search space, and you're saying it's one of these sets. And so we said, actually what we do as humans is raga verification. We don't do raga recognition at all. In fact, today even ChatGPT or whatever it does, it only tries to verify what you might have thought. It cannot actually do things which are not there. I mean, that's a different thing altogether. So here was an example, and let's say you said it was Brindavan Saranga. So all of you can recognize it's not Vrindavan Saranga, it's Kapi. What happens is, if I use a machine learning algorithm without looking at its cohorts, the Vrindavan Saranga has Desh, Vrindavani, Kapi, and Surati as cohorts, but just say absolutely which of these is it, it's going to tell me it's Vrindavan Saranga. But then I say it relative to this, which is the best, and immediately it comes out with Kapi. So that's what we realized, that it actually does much better. And then we have now scaled this idea to, we did it with 17 ragas and 30 cohorts or whatever. We scaled this to 182 ragas using locality sensitive hashing, but it's also another machine learning algorithm. And then we realized certain interesting things. What we found was, I was talking to you about Pallavi lines from which I can get the raga. Then we said, let's say when the person is doing a korvai in the Swaraprastara very, very fast, can I identify the raga? Initial Pallavi lines, initial part of the composition, you notice here Todi, Shankaravarnam, Natai, these are all pitch contours, are looking distinctly different. But this is towards the end of the alap now, okay? And then you find that they all look similar. So the way I look at it is when you're listening to a concert, the artist is first establishing the outline. Like a painter, for example, is going to say, I'm going to, if you just draw the outline of a mountain, then you say, okay, he's going to do a scenery with mountains. And then now, or another person who's drawing the road, then you say, okay, maybe he's going to draw a road now. And then when you draw the tree may be identical in both cases. In both places, you're drawing the same tree, but it is in the context, one is in the context of the road, and another is in the context of a mountain scenery. This is exactly what happens, we think, in the context when an artist is singing in the beginning. They establish the outline of the raga, then they make a lot of improvisations, and you're listening to it in the context of the raga. It seems correct, absolutely correct. But when you do something kind of raga ID or whatever it may be, it might not even be correct if you take it out of context. So the context is extremely important. That first outline, when they set it up, it's always, when you listen to a concert, first 3-4 seconds, I know what the raga is. That's very important for us, and this is precisely what is being done. Now, what we did was, okay, we have, it was fun for a while for us to do Raga ID, because everybody said, can you give us an app and all that? That was all very well. Then we said, can we actually reproduce this music using signal processing and machine learning? So we found as it was interesting that Carnatic music is what are called constant pitch notes and these stationary points, which I already said I use it for Raga verification. So there's flats here, and then there are these undulations. These are called stationary points. And this is one of my most recent PhD students' work. And we just use this to reproduce the music. I'm going to play the original audio. See, this was actually many Pallavi lines, many times she has repeated the same thing that has been synthesized by quantizing it. So you could actually regenerate it. And here I'm playing it as an accompaniment to show that it follows it. What we generated is accompanying it. Now, what is the purpose of this? The purpose of this is that I can use it as a learning thing. I can create it in my own tonic, and I can listen and I can do like a karaoke with it to learn from any musician that you want. So it's essentially a learner's aid is what we're making. And this graph just shows some kind of issues with all these things. We also did some work on raga parenting. This is again a very recent piece of work. And we wanted to say, there are these sampurna ragas, which are 7 notes in it. And there are these janya ragas, which have less than 7 notes. And the idea is to find who is the parent, from where is it generated. And machine learning algorithms actually tell you that for some other ragas, like something like Mohanam, which is a janya supposedly of Harikambodi, there are a whole lot of parents. There's a family of parents. So it does confirm what some of the musicians have been telling. We've done various other things. We've also done, I talked about the 35 applauses in a particular concert. We had continuous recordings, and we were able to segment at the applauses, again finding the pattern of the applause. The applause is a beautiful eye pattern. If one person starts clapping, then everybody joins in, the amplitude becomes very large, then again it reduces, and finally there's one single person clapping. The pattern is a beautiful eye pattern, and that's what we detected using machine learning. And then we were able to, using the property that Carnatic music concerts, no two items have the same raga, we did some post-processing, and we were able to actually, so you have, these are the songs that were sung, and these are the applauses that you saw, then you can actually say what are the items that are there. And then, so this kind of concludes what I was talking about in melody. I think I'll very quickly wind up in a few minutes. What we were doing was, we said the next thing that we wanted to do was, was the Taniya Vartanam, I must tell you. Actually, while we were doing this work, we were contacting various musicians, and Dr. Rumayalpuram Shivaraman came to know about what work we were doing. He called me to his house and I said, while I'm playing, can you tell me what strokes am I playing? What solukat? Can you tell that? That's what he said. And this is to give you what it is all about. So these are the strokes, and he wanted us to find those strokes and also name those strokes. Then again, we found out some clever way of doing some signal processing algorithms where it will segment at the stroke level and perform some machine learning to identify it. I'm not going to go into the details of it. There are also deep learning models, but I must tell you, these deep learning models, if they have not seen the data before, they simply cannot work. So what we do is, we use some prior processing, normalize the tonic, then give it to the deep learning algorithm. It performs very well. That's precisely what we do. And we were able to finally, I'm not going to go into some details here. I'll just skip all this and just show you one. And the point is, in percussion, for example, mridangam has tonic, ghatam has marginal tonic, morsing has tonic, kanjira no tonic, tawil no tonic. Western music does not have tonic, and that means what I'm saying is not played to a shruti. So these are details that we have to find out. And then we found out that again here, how did we identify what the sound was? Here is a waveform which has both an amplitude and a frequency change. And this is ghatam signal, again has an amplitude change, and the frequency also changes. Frequency means the number of, for those of you who do not understand, number of zero crossings. How many times does this waveform cross the zero axis? And you find that this is a characteristic, is what we found out. And then we built algorithms to machine learning algorithms. And then there are variations of this. Machine learning is very good at learning to average and find the underlying characteristics. Once you say, okay, this is the stroke, now find the underlying characteristic, it does it very well. And as I said, we need both amplitude and frequency modulation. There's an amplitude that is changing and the frequency is changing. And we just, to show this over here, this is the time waveform. And when you look at it, frequency as a function of time, you actually see there is actually a silent stroke over here, which gets picked up. We do both amplitude and frequency modulation. And here, for example, we were able to detect this silent note, silent stroke that is there. And then we got a few things done. And then, of course, again, as I said, there are some tonic instruments, some are not having a tonic. So we had to normalize the tonic. This is the same thing, beam. And then you bring it back to the same tonic, just as I had done for the Pallavi thing. And then we, of course, repeated Raman's experiments, which he had done a long time back. We worked with various artists. And then now we actually, this is Rumayalpuram Shivaraman sir's Taniya Vartanam. It's not perfect, but we are able to, on the top, it gives you what it has identified. And there are some substitutions and there are some insertions. I just want to point out, at least, substitutions are more or less okay. What we found was these insertions, actually, he is tapping on the right and the left of the mridangam. There's a slight difference in the time. And our algorithm picks it up that there is as if it's a different stroke. So we did all these kinds of things. The next thing that we wanted to do was, can we find who are the artists who are playing? And we used a kind of information theoretic measure to say that, if you look at a Taniya Vartanam, there is an Abhiprayam, there is a Korappu, there is a Mohra and a Korvai. So you want to segment these things and do some kind of an analysis. There will be a Kanjira and Mridangam, or Kanjira and Ghatam, who are talking to each other. Can we find these? This is called diarization. And we used a very information theoretic approach to do this diarization. And I'm just going to play what we were able to achieve, because I think it's time for me to close. This is what it does. This is the, so these are the, so you, I just want, look at the speed of. So it's able to diarize between mridangam and, actually when you have to wear headphones and listen to it and correct it, these were marked by musicians for us. And we got this, it actually performed really well. And some other segmentation tasks that we're doing is, we're also doing in Hindustani music, where what is this? Is this a solo tabla concert? And in tabla concerts, there's something called a peshkar, a kaida, and gat, a tukda, and a chakradar. And one of my students is working on this, and using similar ideas, we're able to. So there's a peak that you see here. So you can see that speed difference which is there, and we have to actually pre-process it in a particular way. This is the original waveform which doesn't show you that. We do a little bit of pre-processing, then deep learning works like a song and doesn't require so much data either. We have done other works on source separation, artist identification, and to conclude, there are various tasks that can be done. It's still an open field. We have basically touched the tip of the iceberg for that matter. And for those of you who are interested, we have produced a book or monograph on Indian art music, computational perspective. This kind of consolidates efforts across various institutions. And an acknowledgement, this was partially funded by the Compmusic project and Spark and IIT Madras Exploratory Research projects. And these are all my students who worked on various aspects. And there are musicians. Sri T.M. Krishna was with us, Srimati Sangeeta Shivakumar, Vignesh, Akshay, they were in my lab, Melpuram Shivaraman sir, Sanjay Subramaniam and his co-artists. They gave us many concerts free. And RK Convention Center actually made available a large number of concerts free for us to do any kind of processing. There's no synthetic data in all of this. Charsur allowed us to use their purchase data for research purposes. And finally, thanks to all my collaborators, Aravind, M.N. Murthy, Preeti Rao, Xavier Serra and his team from Pompey Fabra, Ajay Srinivasmurthy, Ranjini, Sankalp, Kaustu Gambulu, with whom we did all this work. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this very nice talk from the engineering perspective. I'll just take a couple of questions right now and for you, and then maybe I will ask all the speakers to come here and we'll go through pending questions for the other talks. The first question is from Subhashri. She posted it on Twitter. Can you use your method to discover a raga or to make a new composition, maybe in the future?
Yeah, I think that is possible. See, this is something, okay, in fact, the scale-based ragas, for example, are actually continuously being discovered. So I think it is possible to discover ragas using machine learning and then you say what is pleasing. But one thing is, what is aesthetically pleasing requires an emotional quotient. And I think machine learning algorithms don't have the emotional quotient as yet. You will still have to ask a human being to say, is this emotionally appealing or not? So it can generate various things. In fact, as Professor Siddhartha was saying, you can generate a lot of examples. You can ask it to generate new ragas, new things. But then somebody has to say this is really pleasing. And what is interesting is it will only generate the sequence of sound notes. And it does not generate the bhavam that is there even today. We are not able to, whatever I played in the synthesis, I'm not able to put the human voice back with what is called its timbre or timbre, where it's an interplay between the pitch and you decide that I want to sing this sound slowly or I want to sing this sound a little louder and so on. These parts, machine learning gets it pretty wrong, even today, with whatever we have. Yeah, but it's possible. Yeah.
Okay. So the next question, in fact, I think the answer ties in with what you have already said. This is by an anonymous poster. It says, can you try and synthesize the Jugalbandi?
Actually, we have done what is called, it's possible because we have already done source separation. In fact, we can separate the violin out, we can separate the vocal out, we can separate the mridangam out in fact, I like doing it because sometimes I don't like somebody who's singing. So I'd like to listen to only some people. It's possible to do that. So in much the same way, it's possible to generate Jugalbandi. It's not a big deal as long as tonic is matched.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's thank Hema once again.